Most earthquake movies are the same film. A city collapses, a hero runs. CGI fills the gap where the story should be. The films on this list are different. Critics notice them for different reasons. Some for spectacle, some for silence, and one for being the most emotionally precise earthquake film ever made. Every title in this ranking is available now on streaming or digital platforms, depending on your region. From a Norwegian sequel that outperformed its own original, to a 1992 Iranian film sitting at 100% on Rotten Tomatoes that almost nobody has seen, these are 7 earthquake movies critics actually love. Cloverfield. This film doesn't start with an earthquake, it ends with one. And by the time it arrives, you have forgotten you were watching a monster movie, a going-away party, a group of friends in New York, and then something hits the city from the water. Found footage, no wide shots, no context, just a camera running and people trying to understand what is happening around them faster than the film would allow them to. Cloverfield works because it strips out everything disaster movies normally give you. The news anchor explaining the event, the government character on the phone, the establishing shot of what is destroying the city. You get none of that. Just the ground shaking, buildings cracking, and the specific terror of not knowing if running in any direction makes sense. The earthquake sequence in the final act is one of the most disorienting endings in modern blockbuster cinema. 77% on Rotten Tomatoes. The film that proved found footage could work at the scale of the city. Aftershock. This is not a disaster movie. It is a film about the decision a disaster forces you to make in 4 seconds. And the next 32 years that come after it. Based on the 1976 Tangshan earthquake in China, which killed over 240,000 people in under a minute. The film opens with a mother trapped under rubble with her twin children on either side of her. Rescuers tell her they can only save one. She chooses, and then she has to live with it. What director Feng Xiaogang does with the next 2 hours is genuinely extraordinary. The earthquake is over in the first 10 minutes. What follows is a family study spanning 3 decades. The daughter who survived believing she was left to die. The mother who chose her brother. The silence that grows between them until the 2008 Sichuan earthquake forces them back together. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is that the mother made the right decision. And it still destroyed her. Buried 1 man, 1 coffin, no earthquake on screen, and one of the most suffocating films ever made. Ryan Reynolds plays Paul Conroy, a civilian truck driver in Iraq who wakes up in a wooden box underground with a lighter, a flask, and a phone with a dying battery. An earthquake, or something like one, put him there, or someone did. The film never fully explains. It doesn't need to. For 95 minutes, the camera never leaves the coffin, not once. No cutaways to the search happening above ground. No scenes of his family. Just the box, the darkness, and the sound of soil shifting around him every time he moves. Rodrigo Cortés directed the entire film in a sequence of physical coffins built on a gimbal. No CGI, and the result is one of the most technically accomplished and emotionally punishing single-location films in cinema history. The ground isn't the monster here. The silence is. 87% on Rotten Tomatoes, a film that will make you need to be outside immediately after you finish it. Shin Godzilla. This film is not what you think it is. Released in Japan in 2016, Shin Godzilla is officially a monster movie. But what director Hideaki Anno built underneath the spectacle is something far more specific and far more cutting. A film about the complete institutional failure of a modern government to respond to a crisis it did not predict and cannot categorize. The creature arrives from an underwater seismic event. What follows is not an action film. It is a political satire so precise and so furious that Japanese audiences recognized every bureaucratic ritual being mocked. Committee meetings, press conferences, chain of command paralysis. Officials waiting for permission to act while the city burns. Godzilla is almost beside the point. The disaster Anno is documenting is the gap between the scale of what is happening and the speed at which people in power are able to respond to it. It is a film made by someone who watched the 2011 Tohoku earthquake and tsunami response and did not forgive it. 86% on Rotten Tomatoes. The only kaiju film on this list. Also, the most politically intelligent disaster film of the last decade. The Wind Rises. Hayao Miyazaki does not make earthquake movies. He made one, and it is one of the most beautiful and devastating sequences in animation history. The Wind Rises is a biographical film about Jiro Horikoshi, the engineer who designed the Mitsubishi Zero fighter plane. It is a film about ambition, love, and the moral cost of making beautiful things for war. The 1923 Great Kant earthquake arrives roughly 20 minutes in. And what Miyazaki does with it tells you everything about how the film understands catastrophe. No destruction porn. No wide shot of buildings collapsing for spectacle. Instead, the camera stays at street level with the people inside the chaos of bodies moving against each other in a city that is no longer recognizable. The earthquake is shown as something that happens to individuals, not to a skyline. And it changes Jiro permanently, not because of what it destroys, but because of who he meets inside it. 89% on Rotten Tomatoes, the most quietly devastating earthquake sequence in any film on this list, and it lasts less than 10 minutes. The Quake. The Wave was Norway's earthquake film. The Quake is its reckoning, a direct sequel to The Wave. The Quake follows the same geologist, Christian, now dealing with the psychological wreckage of what he survived in Geringer. He is paranoid, estranged from his family, and convinced that Oslo is sitting on a fault line that the government is refusing to take seriously. He is right, and nobody listens until the ground opens under the city. What makes this film work better than most sequels is that it refuses to repeat the formula. The Wave was about a wave. The Quake is about what surviving does to a person. The way disaster rewires you, makes you see threat in everything, costs you the relationships you need most. The earthquake is almost secondary. The real story is a man who cannot stop the disaster happening inside him long enough to stop the disaster happening outside. And then the building comes down, and everything the film has been building toward lands in a single sequence that is physically terrifying and emotionally earned at the same time. 85% on Rotten Tomatoes. A smarter, harder, and more personal film than its predecessor. And life goes on. In 1990, an earthquake struck the Gilan region of northern Iran and killed over 50,000 people in under 2 minutes. Abbas Kiarostami drove into the devastation with a camera an actor standing in for himself, and no script. What came out of it holds 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. Almost nobody outside of cinema circles has seen it, and Life Goes On is technically a semi-fictional road movie. Kiarostami wants to find the young boys who starred in his previous film and survived the earthquake. The director in the film is played by an actor. The survivors are playing themselves. The collapsed roads, crushed houses, and displaced families are entirely real. The line between what is staged and what is documented is impossible to locate. That impossibility is the point. What Kiarostami found in the rubble was not grief. It was people repairing their satellite dishes, planning weddings, arguing about football. Going on. Not because they had recovered, but because going on is what people do, whether the world deserves it or not. The film does not exploit the earthquake. It does not document the earthquake. It asks what the earthquake reveals about the people who were already there. 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. The most critically perfect earthquake film ever made, and the one most likely to stay with you longer than the ground shook. So now the question is simple. In these films, what hits harder? The moment the ground breaks, or what the people left standing had to carry afterwards? Write it in the comments. And if you want more rankings covering the most intense and critically respected disaster films ever made, subscribe now, because the next list is going to be even more brutal.